If you happened to be watching Good Morning America this morning, then you heard the big announcement, which is that I have written a new novel, and it is called The Snow Forest, and this is its gorgeous cover.
What you just saw was best-selling author Elizabeth Gilbert announcing the release of her new novel, The Snow Forest, which was scheduled to be published in February of 2024. A book release is something that should be exciting for every author, right? If you're here because you're thinking about publishing your first book, it's probably one of those things that you think about daily. But in this case, not exactly, because shortly after Elizabeth released her announcement of her book, this happened.
I'm making a course correction, and I'm removing the book from its publication schedule. It is not the time for this book to be published.
So as you can see, she then made a very public announcement that she was no longer going to publish her book, the historical fiction novel, The Snow Forest, in response to her Ukrainian readers. But to understand how this happened, why it happened, what the reactions were, we need to rewind a bit. What led a best-selling author to cancel her own book? And what does this mean for writers and publishers in general? And what is the general consensus on Elizabeth's decision to halt publication of this particular story? So let's start with the author herself. You may know Elizabeth from works such as Eat, Pray, Love or Big Magic. And if you are a fellow writer or author, this one here is probably on one of your most read or best read shelves. Highly recommend it. But most recently, Elizabeth Gilbert has been featured in many articles due to her recent decision to halt publication of The Snow Forest. She has sparked many opinions and discussion inside and outside of the publishing industry, which we will be getting into later in this video. Now that you know the author, let's talk about the book, The Snow Forest. What the heck is this book even about? This book that was released and then not released and is still not released, what is it about? Well, I'm just going to keep it simple and read you the blurb from Goodreads. In a remote, high-altitude corner of Siberia, a lone family of religious fundamentalists lives isolated and undetected. Since retreating in the 1930s, they have scrounged off the cold and unforgiving land, refusing all contact with society even as they raise their children. Untethered from human progress, unaware even of the events of World War II, their knowledge and beliefs remain frozen in time until their mountaintop homestead is finally discovered. So that story actually sounds pretty great, right? A family living off the edge of society and then rediscovering society. Like, I legitimately want to read this book. What happened? Well, in order to figure that out, we can head directly over to the Goodreads page. We are on the Goodreads page for The Snow Forest. You can no longer leave a review because publication has been halted, but after Elizabeth had announced the launch of her book, we head over to Goodreads, and as you can see, there are 532 ratings, 1-star review. This is obviously not good. So, of note, despite people having not even read the book yet or the book not being in people's hands, Goodreads does allow users to post reviews even ahead of a book launch if it is listed a certain way on the back end. They have been criticized for this in the past as it can cause online campaigns against authors despite the book material not even being out there in the world yet. So anyways, Elizabeth, she announces the launch of her new book that takes place in Russia. And this was the reaction. We will scroll down to the comments here. You can pause or read along with me. But generally, the consensus was that this was a tone-deaf decision of Elizabeth to choose to publish this book at this time due to the ongoing war. And as you can see, we have 1-star upon 1-star upon 1-star review. But that's not the end of the story here. First, Elizabeth announces her new book. Then she receives backlash on her new book. So she decides to address the backlash with her decision to halt publication.
Everybody, it's Liz, and I have an announcement to make. So last week, I announced the upcoming publication of my most recent novel, a book called The Snow Forest, that was set in the middle of Siberia, in the middle of the last century, and told the story of a group of individuals who made a decision to remove themselves from society, to resist the Soviet government, and to try to defend nature against industrialization. But over the course of this weekend, I have received an enormous, massive outpouring of reactions and responses from my Ukrainian readers, expressing anger, sorrow, disappointment, and pain about the fact that I would choose to release a book into the world right now, any book, no matter what the subject of it is, that is set in Russia. And I want to say that I have heard these messages and read these messages, and I respect them. And as a result, I'm making a course correction, and I'm removing the book from its publication schedule. It is not the time for this book to be published. And I do not want to add any harm to a group of people who have already experienced and who are all continuing to experience grievous and extreme harm. So that is the choice that I have made. And I've got other book projects that I'm working on, and I've made a decision to turn my attention to working on those now. So I just wanted to let everybody know that, and thank you very much.
Then she receives even more backlash on her decision to halt publication. So at this point, Liz she can't win. No matter what decision she makes at this point, she can't win. And now this is where I find the story fascinating, because this is where you get to see the mixed reactions to Elizabeth's decision. On the one hand, we have comments like these ones, which are praising Elizabeth's decision, calling her brave, thanking her, applauding her integrity. You can pause the video here to read a few of these comments. On the other hand, we have people feeling disappointed in Elizabeth's decision. People are wondering, what will we have to censor next? Does this mean we have to ban all literature that takes place in any setting where war crimes ever existed? Again, you can pause the video here to take a look at those comments. Now, to be honest with you, there's a lot we can speculate. What were the intentions of her decision? Was she truly being guided by her moral compass? Was this just good PR? Was it a smart business move? We really don't know. We don't have access to the behind the scenes play-by-play of Elizabeth's decision to cancel this book. The Evening Reader makes a great video highlighting her initial reactions on Gilbert's decision to cancel her book, and she highlights how many people are still wanting to read Russian literature and how that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and how we can learn from Russian literature versus trying to eradicate it completely. I'll leave a clip here of her video, but I highly recommend you go to her channel and watch the full video the whole way through. She makes a lot of really interesting points.
A lot of you are still reading Russian literature. I know a lot of you have been reading War and Peace this year. I know a lot of you love Anna Karenina. I know some of you have been reading Dostoevsky or want to read Dostoevsky. There are lots of read-alongs. I know that a lot of you, like Chekhov, whether it's the short stories or the plays.
Again, we do not know the full behind the scenes of how this decision was made. We don't know how many discussions she had with her PR team. We don't know if she made this decision purely on her own. We have no way of knowing that. So I looked at Instagram, I looked at Goodreads, I saw opinions, but I still wasn't satisfied. I still wanted more context. So the New York Times hints at the gravity of the situation, in which they stated, the move comes as publishers and institutions struggle with how to handle Russian art and literature as the war in Ukraine rages on. But that sparks even more discussion on, when is it okay to censor art? Is it dangerous to censor art? Or is it best practice to censor art out of compassion and sensitivity to those currently undergoing hardships? Is there a happy medium between the two? And if so, what is it? To offer you even more perspective, I want to share the thoughts of 3 different novelists, which I found in an article from the Washington Post. Putin's Russia is a far-right imperialist and terrorist state that deserves all the opprobrium directed at it. But this seems very weird to me. I mean, the author's decision, but no book should be set in historical Russia now? A novel about people resisting the USSR, no less? Fully respect any author's right to voluntarily withdraw their own title from publication, but this feels like an absurd overcorrection, and I'm baffled that it was called for in the first place. If the book is good and teaches us things about Russia and the Russian past that we didn't know, and why else would you write a book set in Russia if you weren't trying to do that, then it's a bad decision to pull it. But if the book is not good and uses Russia, as some American authors have done over the years, as a kind of romantic place of history and tragedy, then it's an honorable decision. But without having read the book, it's impossible to know which one of these it is. In general, though, I don't have a problem with writers thinking about how their book will be read or what it is saying politically. Just because it's fiction doesn't mean it doesn't have ideas or values or won't affect people. I think as a writer, you have to believe that it does, and it will. So I agree that writing is powerful, fiction or nonfiction. It can cause impact, it can cause change. And maybe it's more of a silent and confident communicator versus a well-produced TED Talk, although that had to be written, or a cinematic masterpiece, which also had to start with writing. But at the end of the day, big change happens because we sign things in writing, we see things in writing, we consume things in the written form. Anyways, I want to draw your attention now to two organizations who focus primarily on free speech and the expression and advocacy of writers, and we will take a look at their official statements as well. So these two organizations are PEN America and the Authors Guild. So PEN America is a nonprofit organization that works to defend and celebrate free expression in the United States and worldwide through the advancement of literature and humans' rights. The Authors Guild is America's oldest and largest professional organization for writers and provides advocacy on issues of free expression and copyright protection. I mean, these causes are super important, right? But in essence, Elizabeth wasn't being asked to step down by publishers. Yes, she was responding to the reaction of her Ukrainian readers, but she wasn't necessarily censored. She, in fact, she chose to censor herself. She chose to censor herself due to the reaction of her upcoming book release. But I think both of these organizations make very valid points, so let's take a look at what PEN America and Authors Guild have to say. PEN America stated that it is regrettable that Elizabeth Gilbert felt it necessary to delay the publication of a novel set in Russia. Ukrainians have suffered immeasurably, and Gilbert's decision in the face of online outcry from her Ukrainian readers is well intended. But the idea that, in wartime, creativity and artistic expression should be preemptively shut down to avoid somehow compounding harms caused by military aggression is wrong-headed. The timing of the uproar, right after Gilbert announced the forthcoming publication, makes clear that those objecting have not yet had a chance to read or judge the work itself. The publication of a novel set in Russia should not be cast as an act exacerbating oppression. Fiction and culture are essential to supporting mutual understanding and unleashing empathy. The choice of whether to read Gilbert's book lies within readers themselves, and those who are troubled by it must be free to voice their views. We hope Gilbert might reconsider, and we urge others to rally around the on-time publication of her book and the principle that literature and creativity must not become a casualty of war. The Authors Guild released a similar sentiment in which they stated that books should never be censored or banned, but every author should have the right to decide when and how they want to publish their work. It's a personal choice, and since words have power, Elizabeth Gilbert absolutely has the right to decide how and when her words should best be used. Some Americans believe it is a stretch to be so upset about a book set in Siberia a century ago, seemingly detached from the current regime or crisis wrought by Putin, but Gilbert heard and empathized with the pain of her readers in Ukraine, and we respect her decision that she does not want to bring more harm to her Ukrainian readers. To be clear, we would not, however, support the decision of a publisher to pressure a writer to not publish the book. Authors should never be required to withdraw books, but must have the right to speak or not speak when they wish. At the end of the day, Elizabeth Gilbert is Elizabeth Gilbert. What I mean by that is that she is going to be fine financially, career-wise. She will be fine. She doesn't need to ask for permission regarding her decisions on her writing schedule and her publishing schedule. She has her own agency, much like you do, much like the characters in the books that you read or write do. But there is no denying that her actions have sparked a reaction within the publishing industry. And let's face it, the fact that we are even having this conversation right now, whether it's in the comments or it's just this one-sided experience, the fact that you are even watching this on YouTube right now is a very privileged position to be in. You have an internet connection. You have a say in what content you consume. Now, my perspective has definitely changed and shifted as I've been working on this video and looking at different viewpoints, which I will share with you. So initially, when I saw the news of Elizabeth saying that she was going to halt publication of her book, my initial reaction was I was sad. I was siding with authors who were saying things like, we shouldn't have to censor literature. It's not glorifying the war. Like, I don't see why people are censoring it. And that's where I initially landed. But at the end of the day, what I am seeing is that there are two completely separate discussions happening here. One discussion is happening among authors, writers, publishers, artists, and the other discussion is happening among the citizens of Ukraine who are experiencing and living in extreme fear and terror right now. And it goes without saying that one of these groups is much more privileged than the other. For us to be able to write openly about this, discuss this openly online, to sit at home on our computers or on our phones and feel safe in our homes without the threat of war is a huge privilege that we should not take for granted. So to bring it back to Liz's decision, at the end of the day, she could have chose to please the publishing industry. She could absolutely have chose to defend her work, defend free speech, defend her art, defend creative expression alone. But instead, she chose to listen to the timely reactions of a group of people that are less privileged than her. I'd love to know, how do you feel about Liz's decision? Do you think she could have handled this situation differently? Do you think this shouldn't have even happened at all? How are you feeling about the whole thing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a discussion. Let's be nice to each other, and I will see you in the next one.